Hey, welcome back. We're going to add some code now for our recipe program, and we're going to implement the add a recipe PHP code. So right now if I chose add, I get the post that says coming soon. So let's look in our Eclipse files and see what's going on with our add an item. So we know that this file here called show add form will show on the screen if we are looking at menu item 2. Let's double check that. So we're on index.php, page number equals 2, and we're looking at this program called add a recipe. So show add form. Let's open that. Notice it says this is a partial page. It's only supposed to show the form. We're just looking at the form itself. So there's a form container, and then down here is a key item called process add item. So that's the action. Here are the text fields that we're going to be using. So recipe title, recipe ingredients, and recipe instructions. We got to keep track of those. So over here I have process add item, and this is the coming soon part. So let's finish this code off and see if we can add an item to the database. First of all, we're going to have to use session start. That's the first command that you'll use anytime you want to access the login name. Then we want to be able to connect to the database, so we're going to require once our database connector. Now we should be able to get the variables from our form. Let's go check the form out again and see what they were called. So I'm going to copy these guys briefly and put them here because I need to know these items. So now I'm going to capture all of these 3 items and put them into variable names. So let's do a $, recipe title, and let's get that from the get command, and each one of those fields. Okay, so that's the format. Now I just need to capture these other 2 variable names. So I'm going to paste recipe ingredients and copy and paste recipe instructions. And then I'm going to delete the rest of the code just so that I don't make any mistake of leaving it as part of a PHP document. So let's put in $signs and then use the get command for the retrieving the variables from the form. Now remember, the goal is to insert this into the database. So I need to have an insert command and then execute it and see if there's any new data. So let's go with a SQL statement, and I know that I'm going to have an insert command here. So insert into, and then I could try to remember all that, but remember there's a simpler way. Let's just go and run an insert command on our recipes table and then copy the code that comes from there. So our recipe title. Okay, I'm going to attribute this recipe to the person called Bill and choose go. Now I'm going to copy the command here, and then I'm going to use that in my code. This is not simply being lazy about typing code, but I am so prone to errors that I want to make sure that I have all the little quotation marks correct and all the commas. So now instead of the actual value of ham sandwich, I'm going to use the variable called recipe title, and instead of in bread and ham, that looks to me like the ingredients. And then the last item is called the recipe instructions. Okay, now I've got this mysterious number 3. What does that belong to? So that is associated with the user's table ID. So that's the user ID number. I chose Bill, who's number 3 in my list. Where do I get that from? Well, that comes from our session variables. And so I'm going to create a new variable up here called the user. ID. And that is going to come from session, and it is the user ID session variable. Where does that get set? Let's go back and look at the login command. I created this session variable called user ID, and it comes from the login when I read the row for the username and row ID. So just so I don't mistype anything, I'm going to copy session of user ID and paste it into my other code. So let's go to copy. So I'm going to switch back to process add item, and it looks like I typed it correctly, but I'm going to paste over top of it. So now I get the user ID because that's the one that's logged in. Okay, so there's my SQL statement. So I'm going to type out the code for the connections and the insert statement, and this should come from previous knowledge that you've done in previous assignments. Okay, so pause the video here and take a look at what we've created. So first of all, we check to see if the connection is working. Where did this connection variable come from? It was set up here in the database connector file. So if this connector variable is valid, then let's continue. If not, then let's show why it didn't continue. Inside the if statement, we create a SQL query, and that is saved in something called a result variable. If the result variable is valid, then we know that the data was inserted correctly. If there is no result value, then there was an error, and then we display whatever error comes out of that. So we'll just say that the data is inserted successfully. One other thing is we need a place for the user to go back, so I'm going to say click here to return. And then I'm going to insert one of those A tags. So I have an A, href equals, and then I'm going to say index PHP, and then after the here word, I'm going to put in a close tag A. Okay, so let's save the work here. I'm going to push save, and let's go try the insert command now. Add recipe. So let's see. So I'm making very simple recipes just to do short work. So I click add, and I got a data inserted successfully. Click here to return, and then I'm back to the main menu. Now, so far I can't actually look up any recipes. I'm going to leave that for you to create, but let's go check our database and browse our users table and our recipes table. So I've got the ham, and I've also got the soda. So here's your add item. The new learnings from this is the session variables. It looks a lot like the previous work we've done. So much so that I'm going to leave to you some homework. So we have a search form which creates a query. We're looking for recipe name, recipe ingredients, or recipe instructions. Now, we are going to have to implement a search recipe file which is not even listed. So we're going to have to create a new file called search recipes and display results based on what the user searches for. So refer back to previous assignments and you'll be able to get that one done too.